Good evening and welcome to our meetings of April 7, 2021. We actually have 3 items which are on our agenda tonight. We've got a Grants and Community Development Committee, Public Works Committee, and sandwiched in between a special Board of Commissioners. So without any further delay, we will commence the Grant Community Development Committee meeting and call on its Vice Chair, Commissioner Durbin.
Thank you, President Bernheim. Well, tonight we are holding a second public hearing to obtain views of citizens and local organizations on the township's housing and community development needs and recommendations for activities to fund in the 2021 to 2022 fund year 47 CDBG budget. So with no further ado, I am opening the public hearing and asking our esteemed Assistant Township Manager to help us through this presentation.
Yes, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Emily to quickly provide you with the staff recommended CDBG budget. And then after her summary, we can answer any questions the board may have and then open it up to public comment, should there be any public comment, since this is the second required hearing that HUD requires us to do before we adopt the budget. So with that, I will turn it over to Emily to give you a quick summary of the.
Hey, thanks, Bob. Good evening, everybody. Like Bob said, it's the second public hearing. So after this, the public portion is done. You guys are not required to vote on this tonight finally, but we do have to submit it to HUD by May 15th, which is 45 days before the beginning of the new fiscal year. So we'll bring it back to you in May for final approval. But as always, if you have any changes you'd like to make to the budget, we'd love to hear about it tonight or as soon as possible so that we can get it back to you in a timely manner. I'll just also remind you that all of the things that we do, all the activities we take part in, all the projects we do have to come under one of 3 national objectives, which are listed in the issue briefing. Almost everything we do comes under the benefit to low and moderate income persons, but there are 3, so you can check them out. And I'll also remind you that we are subject to 2 caps. One is for admin. We are only allowed to spend 20% of our annual allocation on administration, which is almost never a problem. And we're only allowed to spend 15% on our public services, which always feels like a problem. This year, we actually got lucky and we actually have our HUD allocation. We got $1,034,519 this year, which is about $17,000 higher than last year. So that's always in the right direction. In addition to lots and lots of COVID money we got, but so it's nice to have that this year so we can go forward knowing what we're actually going to spend. And with that, I'll just go quickly through the spreadsheet. And like in prior years, a lot of what we're doing is pretty similar to what we've done before. In the admin group, we have, as always, just the straight up admin fees, which are staff salaries and the money that we use to hire consultants to keep us on the straight and narrow with the HUD regulations, and the advertising we do for these different public meetings and applications and stuff that we have to send out. So that's pretty standard. We have $130,000 allocated for that this year. We did last year as well. The second thing on the list is the Lower Merion Affordable Housing Group, and that's a group we've been working with for a lot of years. They're trying to further affordable housing in the township. In particular, we work with them. We support some of their basic needs, but we also work with them on our home purchase project, which probably a lot of you are familiar with and I'll talk about later. And we also support the Fair Housing Equality Center of Pennsylvania, which is a requirement of HUD that we support furthering fair housing rights. So our total administration is well under the cap. As you can see, the cap's $206,000 and we're all the way down at $149,000.
Emily, excuse the rude interruption. I apologize.
No problem.
Does anybody have who can post for the viewers the graphs, the charts that Emily's been referring to and the other ones? Do we have those to put up by chance? Okay.
Give me a minute. Give me a minute. I'll see if I can track them down.
Right. That just might make it easier for those who are watching and for Emily.
If I tried to do it, it would be a disaster.
I would be right behind you, and I'd probably, if I were lucky, could get the baseball score.
Do you want me to just hold on for a minute while you try to do that?
Let's just try 1 minute. If we're unable to do it, then your explanations are great. Just thought it might be easier for others to follow along. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to tell me to slow down or ask questions in the middle. I don't mind interruptions.
No, you were absolutely excellent as normal. All right, Bob looks perplexed, so why don't we then go ahead, Emily, and I apologize, Commissioner Durbin, for jumping in like that.
There we go. So those are the three admin categories there. Just the regular admin, LMAH, and the fair housing. And that shows what we gave them last year as well and what they asked for each year. So, and that's true of each page.
Not as perplexed as I might look.
Thank you, Bob. The second category is the public services category. And that is the one we are subject to this 15% cap. There is a little caveat in there that we're allowed to use what's called program income from the year before to boost our public services a little bit. So we're allowed to use 15% of the total of our allocation and the program income from the year before. So we are able to bump these up a little bit this year because we did have some program income. These are the categories that we just never have enough money for. And the groups that we're funding, we've funded in the past for many years, and they all do excellent work. The biggest recipient is the Ardmore Avenue Community Center, which was started with CDBG funds many years ago. We support their staffing and also support their minibus program, which takes seniors, citizens, youth, adults with mental and physical challenges to various culture, social, and recreational trips. We also support ElderNet on several of their activities. We support the Palm Senior Center and also New Horizons Senior Center, and also the Women's Center of Montgomery County. So all these people we'd like to fund more, but we're doing what we can with the money that we have this year. So we are bumping it up a little bit from the allowable, but we just don't have enough money to go a lot higher without taking it out of other things. So that's the public services category. The next one is public works. And every year for public works, we fund a certain amount of curb cuts in the township, either new or improved curb cuts. And as you can see, we have given them significantly less in each year than they've asked for. And that's because we usually have remaining funds from a prior year and we can put them together to try to do a slightly bigger project. And we do have funds left over from last year, which is why we're giving them not quite what they're asking for again. After that, we have economic development, and there's two projects that we've done for a number of years under that. The first is the commercial facade program, where a building owner can, if they have some sort of code violation on their building that they want to fix, we can give them grant money to basically secure them an interest-free loan to get it fixed, which is an improvement for them and their business and an improvement for anybody walking down the street. The second is a program that's run under Ardmore Initiative, and it's a job creation program. This is for any new or expanding business. This is run by Ardmore Initiative, by the way. So if there's a new or expanding business in Ardmore, they can apply for grant funds in exchange for agreeing to hire a low to moderate income person and keep them hired or keep somebody hired for a certain number of years. And that's, there is a typo in here. I said that they got $25,000 last year, but they actually got $20,000 last year. So that's just a typo that was caught a little late for this presentation. The next category is rehabilitation. We only have one project under this. We often have more smaller projects, but this year, the only one is going to New Horizons Senior Center. They are without a permanent home for their center, and they have been working with the township to try to make the Ashbridge House at Ashbridge Park their permanent home. In order to do that, there needs to be a lot of fixing up and adding ADA bathrooms and elevators and stuff. For them to inhabit the building, or really anybody else to use that building, we would have to do that work. We funded them $150,000 last year to get the architecture and engineering going, and we're suggesting funding them again this year to actually start the construction, which we don't imagine will happen before the end of the year, at which point they'll be able to apply again next year. They're also applying for a lot of other funding outside of this, but we are suggesting $200,000 to fund them. The last category is the housing category, and this is where a lot of our money goes. I'm sure you all know we run the owner-occupied residential rehab program, which we've been doing for many years. And for that, there's the soft costs and the hard costs of that program, which the soft costs involve things like getting testing done for lead, and the hard costs are about the actual construction. We try to do around 10 houses a year, and this is for township residents who own their own home. And if they qualify under the HUD income limits, they're eligible to get some rehab or upgrade work done to their home to bring it up to HUD standards, minimum safety standards. And we're giving that a little bit less this year for a couple reasons. We're shifting some money to another program, and I'll explain that down below. The second program in here is the home purchase program, and that's the one we do with Lower Merion Affordable Housing. Every year we try to buy one house in the township, and then we do whatever renovations need to be done to bring it up to the standards as well, and then we resell it to a lower moderate income first-time home buyer. And we sell the house back at market rate, but we float a soft second mortgage so that people are able to afford to buy a house they may not otherwise be able to afford to buy. We've done about 12 of those now over the last 12 years. The next two programs are newer. One has been done before, but hasn't been done in recent years, and that's a rental rehabilitation program. We do have in the 5-year, in your packet also is, in addition to the issue briefing and this budget, is also the summary of the 5-year consolidated plan, in which we have suggested that we should do more to support affordable rental in the township. So this is something we're going to try. And this is basically if a landlord has a property that needs some significant repairs, they might be eligible for grant funding to do that if they're willing to agree to rent to a tenant who is low or moderate income for a certain specified period of time. And we are suggesting $50,000 to go to that program this year. And the last program is another new program, for a handyman program for seniors. This would allow us to help out some of our senior citizens in the township with smaller projects. Unlike the rehab projects, because they're seniors and because the projects are so small, we'd be able to do this with a lot less paperwork in terms of qualifying them, doing environmental review, without putting a lien on the house and without doing the extensive bidding we have to do for the other projects. For example, this could include just going in and putting up grab bars in a bathroom, fixing a hot water heater, and it would allow us to help seniors more quickly and more easily for us and for them, and not lien their houses for small projects. So that is, we've taken some of the money from the rehab program and put into that. So it's similar idea, but a different little program. And that brings the total of all of our funding for the year to $1,071,650, which is about $37,000 higher than the grant amount we received, the allocation. So we'll be taking that extra money from 2020 program income. And that is a summary of the budget. And I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. Still recovering from Stanford. there was this rental program, new rental program. Commissioner Stevenson, is this what you had envisioned? You wanted a pilot program to deal with rental situations?
Commissioner Churchill, thank you. This is Emily, correct me if I'm wrong. This is a part of a conversation that we will have in addition to when we have our upcoming affordable housing committee conversation. But in order to, what we're trying to do now is because these funds come through this grant, we need to have this discussion beforehand, but we'll talk more in detail about how we want to have this as a part of the affordable housing conversation. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the answer is yes. We had talked about this, and I guess I don't know if we can answer, but it's a question if a landlord is willing to help us renovate a unit or several units with the condition that the landlord will rent this out to low-income families or people.
Commissioner Churchill, you've gone on mute.
I think that Commissioner Zoloff was also concerned that we have to make sure that these landlords they may already have the funds available to do things like this. The devil's always in the details. I just wanted to voice some concern about this, and I hope that our ad hoc committee meeting can resolve a number of these issues. So thank you.
I just wanted to note that Melissa Walsh has appeared on our screen. She's our consultant for these CDBG funds, and thank you for coming, Melissa. Anyone else have questions? Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Durbin, and thank you to the Grants Committee and Emily for all the work that's gone into this. I know it's hard to make choices, and I'm excited to see that most of the groups got their full requested amount, and so I'm going to go asking about one that did not, and that's Ardmore Initiative. A couple of years ago, I did the same thing, asking that we give them their full amount, and we did, and they were able to use it for improvement to restaurants in Ardmore, and also for job retention, and that is what they've done for the last couple of years. I guess I missed it last year. I thought they'd gotten the fully requested amount. So thanks for pointing out your typo. But I talked to Miss Scarlato. She runs AI over there, and she said that if they were to get their full amount, they would be able to use all of it for job creation or job retention in Ardmore, which I think is something that is desperately needed right now. And so that's a long preamble to a couple of questions, but the general question is, can we find $5,000 more to allocate to the Ardmore Initiative, either through program income, as you mentioned, or potentially Public Works? Looks like another spot where we might be able to find some of that money.
So I think you had made us aware that you were going to raise this, so it gave us an opportunity to look at the budget. And I think there are a couple different possibilities. You could take it out of that Public Works fund, or the administrative fund was another that you could take, either 5 or split it however way you wanted to decide to do that, and give those funds to Ardmore Initiative.
Okay, great. If we were, just to put it into concrete terms, if we took $5,000 from the Public Works Fund, would that have significant negative impact on the ability for us to do these ADA improvements?
Fortunately, we, as Emily indicated earlier, we have remaining funds from current year doing those ADA curb ramps. So I think we still have a good bit of funds that isn't represented here because it doesn't show previous year money left over. And worst case is there's one handicap ramp that we don't do this year that we just put off for a year. If there if the reduction is $5,000. So it's not something that has a significant impact. And I would just point out these ramps that we're upgrading now, the ramps are already in place just because they no longer meet the current standards. They're all being upgraded. So it's not like we're taking a corner that doesn't have any ramp at all and losing it because we're reducing this by 5,000. You know, anything we'd be doing now already has a ramp. It just needs to be upgraded.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I'd hate to be in the position of deciding between ADA improvements and job retention. It sounds like we don't have to. We should be able to get both. I don't think we're voting tonight, so I won't do a formal amendment or anything like that, but I would certainly throw my support into redistributing this small amount so that the Ardmore Initiative can get their full request. Thank you.
I guess what we would like to know from the board is if anyone has any opposition to that, just so we get a feel to whether we move this money or not tonight would be helpful.
Any comments on that, Commissioner Zeloff?
Commissioner Durbin, I actually don't have a comment on that. I have some other questions.
Oh, okay. So nobody's opposed to that small movement in this time when job retention of people in this economy is pretty important, right? All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zeloff, your question.
Thank you, Commissioner Durbin. I have two questions. Emily, that was a very thorough presentation. Thanks very much. The residential rehab program is, a long-standing program that has had remarkable success in this community. It may be, at least to date, the best affordable housing program in the township. Those funds are used to maintain our existing affordable housing stock, which is we do have such a stock, and for income qualified property owners who live in the properties, these funds have been a great benefit. So I'm a little surprised that the proposal is to reduce that funding. So the main question is, will this reduction have any impact on our ability to fund the 10 or so projects per year that you noted that benefit from this program?
It really won't, Scott, because I mean, for one thing, we did put some in the handyman program, which is often part of what we do. So that's there also, but also like the curb cuts, we've had a rough year and a lot of time has been spent on COVID things. So we were slow on rehab this year. So we also have some funds left for rehab last year that we won't catch up and get through all of it with this year. So it really won't affect that at all.
I'm glad to hear that. I would say I'd want to make sure that staff never gets to that point, that you would reallocate. You would come to us for reallocation so that we're never at risk of not having adequate funds in the residential rehab program. And Emily and Bob, I wonder, have you considered the fact that construction materials and construction costs are going up, have gone up, and are probably going up some more?
Yes, and that's been, I mean, in addition to just COVID, that's been happening. The other thing, I think I mentioned this to you before, Scott, but one other thing that happened is when my job was reduced from 2 people to 1, that added a lot of money into rehab as well, because the second person's salary was coming out of there. So just having one person, we're able to put more than we could 3 years ago of the rehab funds actually go into rehab.
Thanks for that reminder, Emily. That's great. So then my second question is on the rental assistance program, which I would consider a big change. And I appreciate Commissioner Churchill previewing my concerns. I mean, there are landlords that are financially capable, but for one reason or another aren't willing to make improvements. And so how do we enforce, or first of all, ensure that rental properties that are renovated with public funds are only rented to income qualified tenants? And how do we enforce it? I mean, I understand program details haven't been worked out, and you may not have those answers, but to me, it's critical because there are that we're going to find that situation where there are financially capable landlords who just aren't willing to make the improvements.
So I think that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to point out that we actually did have a program like this in the past, and part of the obligation of the landlord and the tenant is to annually provide us with documentation that they comply with the low-income HUD standards. So there's an annual report obligation that would come with any funds to renovate the unit that would provide us with assurance that they're complying with those standards.
And can I add to that, Bob, that it's a similar process to what we do with Ardmore Initiative. When we give funds to the businesses to fix up the funds, they have to report back to us on who they've hired, make sure it's low to moderate income, over the specified period of time. So similar to that, I think.
And Bob, do you believe that system of compliance and enforcement works?
Assuming someone is giving us correct information, yes.
So can
I want to say thank you to both of you for answering the questions. I will happily turn the floor over to Commissioner Stevenson.
I'm sorry,
Commissioner
Chairman Durbin,
it's a little hard to hear you. If you can turn up your mic or get closer to it. Right?
Chairman Durbin, and I apologize.
Of course, Commissioner Stevenson.
I didn't raise my hand. I apologize.
That's all right.
So I just wanted to follow up for my colleague, Commissioner Zerloff. I understand the questions that he and Commissioner Churchill have. Part of this model is a model that is used because there's been a shift in the conversation about home ownership versus rentals. And part of the problem is, and I think that Commissioner Zerloff is correct, that if this is to move forward, there needs to be some type of check system in place to make sure that if we're using these funds, that the landlords are complying with those proposals of using those funds. However, I think it's important about those conversations to understand that if we look at from when this project has started and the focus on home ownership, that the price of homes in Lower Merion was reasonably priced lower. And the price of home ownership and trying to acquire a home, even if ones that have to be rehabbed, are extremely higher. And there has been a shift in those forget about Lower Merion, across the country, that the housing market is one in which it is difficult for folks to find a housing. However, so what we want to do is, in the interim, how do we, number one, secure housing for people, particularly workforce, moderate income, low income folks, in which one of our goals is. And the rental program, I think, would be one that would help support that. That is not, however, again, taking away from anything that you're saying about having those check structures in place, that if a landlord is using these funds, that to make sure that they are not veering off from the purpose of this program, and that is for low income and affordable and moderate income folks. And I think that as we move forward, that we task staff with presenting that aligned with any funding that we have, that those procedures in place before we distribute any funds for it.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Anybody else have questions or comments? President Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Durbin. And Emily, thank you, and for everybody that put this together and for the excellent presentation. And I'm going to apologize for not bringing this out to you before this, but it is your excellent presentation that somewhat educated me about the pilot program for the handyman assistance when you gave a couple of examples. I can easily see that the request will exceed $25,000 that we're putting aside for this. This is such a good idea that would be utilized by many, many people. So the question that I have is, not can we find more money for it yet, because we could juggle this, all night long because every single one of these are worthwhile projects. But from an administrative standpoint, are we set up to be able to handle the requests and determine how to allocate this? And then what the protocols would be? Does somebody have to come with a handyman in mind as opposed to us finding somebody when they say, my hot water heater doesn't work? I mean, how's this going to operate?
So like the rental program, we haven't worked out all the details yet, but it will be a lot easier for us to do this because we do get projects like this already.
Right.
And currently when I have to do a lot of intake on their income, I have to do an environmental review on each house. We have to bid it out a lot. We have to put a lien on them. So that's going to cut out a lot of the paperwork. And I've been talking to Melissa, who's on the line with us. Sorry for not introducing her in the beginning, about there are different ways to do this in terms of having a couple people that you are your go-to people. It won't be the homeowners probably picking their own handyman. It will be us telling them who to use, but it will be a much quicker process for doing a thing like putting in ADA bars.
Yeah, and I get for another time, if we're making recommendations, what we have to be concerned about, what, if any, liability we may have. But yeah, just thinking through this, the logistics of this program, which is extraordinarily worthwhile, have to, somebody said earlier, get through the devil of those details. So, all right. Again, thank you all very much. Thank you, Commissioner Durbin.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, so we are here as part of this hearing also to take public comment. We received a couple of written submissions. I wondered if there was anyone live, Jody, that wanted to testify? Not that you're aware of. Okay. Well, I can summarize that we received, and all the commissioners received, a letter from Brandon Trombetta of Eldernet, who provided an overview of the services that they are trying to provide for people and a request for continued support. He gave us a, let's see, 2-page letter, which is part of the record. There's also a letter from Rachel Wentworth of the Housing Equality Center of Pennsylvania, which gives an overview of their services and requests for continued support. We've worked with them for many years. There's a letter from Alyssa Berardi, the director of New Horizons Senior Center, which gives an overview of the services they're providing and she requests continued support. As you know, we're trying to help them have a place at Ashbridge House if possible. And the last one is from Maria Macaluso, the Women's Center of Montgomery County, who has given us an overview of the services that they provide to women who have suffered from, I think, domestic violence and other problems. And they provide a lot of services to people that are necessary when they're going through transitions with that. So are there any comments on any of those letters from some of the recipients of our funds? All right. Seeing none. Are there any other comments commissioners want to make before we close this hearing? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to hope that we have given sufficient direction to staff, and I'm going to close the hearing at this time. It's the end of our second public hearing. And that covers the business of the committee tonight, President Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Durbin. And once again, thanks to everybody who participated in putting this together. It is noted by several of us, and all of us concur, it's a very difficult task to do, to allocate that amount of money to all the worthy causes. So with that, that will bring us to the next section of our meeting this evening. and that is a special meeting for the Board of Commissioners. And we'll call that meeting to order and ask if you all be so kind as to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, we will do our Zoom roll call, which will note that this evening, Commissioners McComb, Sinai, and O'Neill are taking care of some personal business and are without us, but everybody else is present and accounted for. We do invite public comment for our one topic of discussion this evening, which is the appointment of a new parking service director. I don't see anybody from the public making any public or 74th for any comments. And what I shall do is I shall formally make the motion to consider for confirmation of the appointment by the township manager of John Collins, who I see is with us, and welcome, John.
Thank you.
To the position of Director of Parking Services, and that will be effective as of May 3, 2021. Do I have a second for that motion? Thank you very much, Commissioner Durbin. And I believe our manager, Mr. McNeely, may wish to provide us some background and information on Mr. Collins.
Yes, thank you, President Bernheim. We lost our longtime parking director, Tom Pentandi, to retirement in January, and we immediately started a recruitment process and had a number of applicants and a number of very qualified applicants that we ended up interviewing. But in conclusion, we have determined that John Collins, who, as you know, is with us tonight, is my nomination for parking director. Mr. Collins has 30 years of experience in the parking business, and both on the private sector side and on the public sector side. Including 20 years as the parking operations manager for the University of Pittsburgh. We're yanking him from one side of the state to the other here for this job. He's also served as the parking operations manager for Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, parking director for Baltimore County Revenue Authority, and has worked for a private sector transportation and parking company, Transport U LLC. He's got a background, a degree in industrial management and accounting, and he's also a certified parking professional by the International Parking Institute. He's also been involved in the past and served as president of the Pennsylvania Parking Association, an organization that our past director, Tom Pentandi, belonged to, and is a group of professionals that compare notes across the state. So, in conclusion, I think John will bring a lot of expertise to our parking department. He'll be able to step right in with his many years of experience, and we really look forward to having him on board. I know the police department and Bob and I have been doing what we can in Tom's absence to kind of make sure the parking department's still functioning and moving along. But it'll be good to have this important department head position filled, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. And of course, Mr. Collins is here too to make any remarks or answer any questions if the board would like.
All right. Thank you very much. And seeing that, I'll ask any members of the board if they wish to ask Mr. McNeely or Mr. Collins questions. I will tell you that coming from Pittsburgh, Mr. Collins has been made aware of the requirement of wearing Eagle shirts. So, anybody before we call the vote have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thanks, President Bernheim and Mr. Collins. If the vote goes your way in a few moments, it sounds like you'll be moving here from outside of our township.
Yes.
Okay, and we hope that you'll move into our township. or at least very close to our township?
I'll be close. I'm actually going to be living in Melbourne.
Okay.
So I get an apartment there.
Okay, thanks very much.
But yeah,
Right.
and I don't look very good in green, so I don't know if I can do that, but I'll do my best.
They come in
I don't
black.
think anybody looks good in green on TV.
Hey, you
Well,
can
black,
always
I have a
wear-
lot of black.
You can always wear Phillies attire too, you know.
I bought my first Phillies hat. I did go to the opener last week. I was in town to get my apartment set up, so I went to the game. So I did buy a Phillies hat. So I'm on the. We don't have a baseball team here, so I don't have to worry about it.
Okay. All right. And-
One follow-up, President Bernheim, I note a Western Pennsylvania accent from Mr. Collins, which would match that of our township manager, and wonder if that had anything to do with the hiring process. Just kidding.
I work very hard to not be a yinzer, but sometimes it slips out.
Thanks.
I apologize for that.
Any other deeply substantive comments or questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing none, that will be, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Durbin, my apologies.
Yeah, I don't know if it's deeply substantive, but I just wanted to say that we've had good experience with people coming from the western part of the state, thanks to our wonderful township manager. And it looks to me like you have a great deal of experience in what can be a thankless job, since there are people who will complain about everything. But we're really delighted to have somebody this qualified fill this role. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Durbin. Anybody else? Yes, Commissioner Grimes. You're on mute.
Thank you. I just want to point out that, but totally by coincidence, I have a Pitt cup that I've been sitting with. As some of you know, my son graduated from Pitt last year, so I have a lot of experience dealing with the parking at University of Pittsburgh. Fortunately, no tickets that I will admit to, but I just want to say, Mr. Collins, if you run, I will give you full credit for purposes of this conversation for the efficient parking operation at Soldiers and Sailors and other places at Pitt. And if you're able to, except for move in and move out sometimes, but if you're able to do the same thing here, we're in good hands. So thank you.
I'll do my best. I promise.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, then I will officially call the vote and ask everybody who is in favor of clearly an excellent choice for our parking service to please raise your hand indicating aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Mr. Collins, we welcome you aboard, and we look forward to all the expertise that you bring to us in many, many ways. And
thank you.
Also, I'm sure you'll look good in that Phillies red.
I'll do my best.
Indeed it was, but Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. With it, that will actually conclude the business that we have for our special Board of Commissioners meeting, which brings us to our next item for this evening, and that is our Public Works Committee, and we'll acknowledge its chair, Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you very much, President Bernheim. We have one item today for the Public Works Committee. It's a discussion item, and it is to give direction to staff on the retrofit of used police vehicles or the purchase of new electric vehicles to be used as inspector vehicles. This is actually the second meeting that we've had about this. We met on March 3rd, 2021, and fleshed out a lot of this. And to frame this for everyone for where we are right now, we have one option where we can agree with staff that staff is giving the most efficient and cost-effective solution as is its charge. Or we can disagree and say that we have a more efficient and cost-effective solution than staff does. Or another way that we can disagree is say staff may have the most cost-effective and efficient solution, but we want to have a new policy. And this can be driven by other concerns such as environmental issues. We'll begin with a staff presentation, then commissioner questions, then public comment, if any, and then one round of commissioner comment. We've already gone back and forth on this a lot, and just to avoid it getting argumentative, raise all your points when you speak at the end. And I know that it's been discussed already that we may try to defer the purchase of one or up to all 5 of these electric vehicles until after a sustainability director is hired around mid-year. And the only thing I would ask is if that is the choice or your choice, please, while you're giving your comments, give some kind of direction in terms of metrics, cost, carbon use, things that you would like to see passed on to the sustainability director. Because in talking to Public Works, I think there's a little bit of concern that if we just defer to the sustainability director without actually giving any direction to the sustainability director, it could lead to just a lot of uncertainty, especially since we don't know who we're going to hire yet. So with that, I'll turn over the discussion to our Director of Public Works, Paul McElhenney.
Thank you, Commissioner McCann. Thank you for having us this evening. Along with myself tonight, we have our very able-bodied head of fleet, our supervisor for fleet, Mr. Multerry, who is here to aid me when needed, when I can't answer all of the questions. So Pete's my right hand when it comes to this and our one of our greatest resources. So that said, I'm going to share my screen. And what I will be doing is bringing up the cost comparison sheet that was attached with the agenda for this evening. And I will walk through that comparison, explaining each of the line items, what the factors were into those, and then afterwards receiving and taking any questions you may have as to explaining the reasoning behind it or any of the questions you may have. So with that, I'm going to turn to sharing my screen. And if you give me one moment, here we go. Jody, are you able to see my screen? Thank you. So while I go through this presentation, I will also explain some definitions that were, or questions that were brought up over the course of time between this being put to the board, sent out to the board, and now, so that everybody and the public has a better understanding of what some of this means. So if you look at your first line item here, which was the initial cost of the vehicle, we show $2,400 of a retrofitted vehicle versus the EV purchase price of $37,495. If I may offer, the $2,400 is $1,100 less than what was presented at the meeting earlier this year. This number here is the actual cost, average cost of what it costs us to retrofit the last 6 vehicles that we've done this to. The $3,500 was our allocation that we were putting in case we ran into additional, but we wanted to give apples to apples. The EV purchase vehicle, this is based on the purchase of a 2021 Bolt, and this is our CoStar price. This is our contract CoStar pricing if we were to go purchase it through our state-run program today. This does not include any of the rebates or anything of that nature. So we based all of our calculations on an 8-year life cycle of the vehicles. Reason we picked an 8-year life cycle is the battery warranty on the Bolt is 8 years. Not having any historical data, we use the 8-year warranty as our basis for our calculations. So, very simple. Our second line is the initial cost of the retrofit divided by what we used to do as a 3-year cycle. So that's $800 a year. With a lifetime retrofit, with the next line being the $6,400 is 8 years at $800. The EV, the Bolt is the same. It's the initial $37,000 divided by 8. And then after 8 years, you're at the $37,000 mark. Fuel cost per kilowatt or gasoline. That said, we took the average mileage that's put on these vehicles. We multiplied that out. And this is what, at our current fuel cost, we spend per year on average per our regular gasoline vehicles in the building and planning department. The 92.74 is based on the kilowatt hours, based on our current electric cost, understanding that we are carbon free, but they are rec credits. So ideally, we represented what the electric cost would be. Lifetime fuel cost is very simple. It's the above line, the 543 times 8 years, the 92 times 8 years for your total cost through the cost of owning that vehicle. Yearly maintenance costs. This brought up question. Currently, with the retrofitted vehicles, we average $260 a year for repairs. Question was asked why we would put in the same number or even a number with the EV purchase vehicles. Very simply put, we do still need to inspect these vehicles. We do account for having to change wiper blades, consumables, such as windshield wiper fluid and such. Budgeting, we like to include a little bit in case we get a flat tire or something of that nature. We'd be doing a disservice to you and the public by not accounting for such things and not having money available to us in our budget. So very simple. Our lifetime maintenance cost is the 260 times the 8 years. That said, we did not escalate an 8-year life cycle on the EV vehicles. We have no data. We are not able to extrapolate or go any further, so we kept it at the 260. Our hope would be that we would be able to provide a better estimate in the future if we move forward with electric vehicles as we start accumulating historic data. Next, you'll see what we call vehicle sales proceeds. This is what the $5,000 is what we are averaging on the sales of our vehicles right now for the used police vehicles at the time we convert them from building and planning vehicles and we sell them at auction. So we've included that. You'll see that the next line is $15,000. The reason we did this is because if we followed our normal course of policy, we would be selling the current vehicle, which would yield $5,000. In 3 years, we'd be selling the second vehicle that would be retrofitted now. That would yield us another $5,000. And at the end of year 6, we would sell the third vehicle, and we would be at $15,000. So that net credit is being shown against both vehicles so that you have a comparison. That said, this $5,000, when we do receive it, goes back into the equipment fund. It is not encumbered. It is not directly to any vehicle or said vehicle. It goes back into the fund to help offset additional costs. So when you run through to the bottom line of this part of the presentation, you'll see that the retrofitted vehicles actually save us $2,169 using our current policy and our current numbers. To purchase an EV vehicle, not making any assumptions of any grants or rebates, overall lifetime cost for that vehicle is $25,316. If we use the EV purchase of a new Bolt, and we include a $7,500 credit for the funding from the state, and it would bring us down to $17,816 lifetime cost for an EV vehicle using our matrix that we use for all of our other purchases within the township. That said, I'm going to move down to the next portion here, this section here, which is essentially a recap. Yearly rental rate. This term rental caused some confusion. This is an internal term that we use for our accounting within the township, within staffing. Essentially, Public Works has the responsibility of purchasing all vehicles and all equipment. The recommendations, everything flow through us, through our fleet manager. We are the keepers of the vehicles. So essentially, we put together a rental rate for each department, who then puts it into their budget, and then on a monthly basis, basically a spreadsheet line move from their department into the equipment fund is shown. So it is considered, we use internally the wording rental rate. So if you look at the first line item, Essentially, it's the cost of acquisition, our cost of yearly maintenance, fuel, and everything. Again, it comes out to $1,600 roughly a year. At the end of 3 years, we're roughly at $4,800. At the end of the 8 years, we're at $9,000. Cumulative, or excuse me, 6 years is $9,000. At the end of 8 years, we're at $12,000 for a negative $2,100. If we move over to an EV vehicle with no grants, credit, or placed against it, the first year rental is $5,000. At 3 years, we're at $15,000. At the end of year 6, we've spent $30,000. And at the end of 8 years, we're at $40,316, less the $15,000 if we were looking at it as those monies being credited towards that vehicle. Again, we come out at $25,000. We move over into the next line item, crediting the $7,500 for the rebate, going through the same year, first year, 3, 6. You can see that when we get to the end of the 8 years, our cost of ownership for that vehicle is $17,816. We then moved down. There was a question about the social cost of greenhouse gas, which this item does not hit our spreadsheet, doesn't hit our accounting. So using our current policy, we have no directive to factor in and use these costs towards our decision making at this time. It's not to say that the board cannot incorporate that into the policy and give us as a directive, but since it doesn't hit the bottom of our spreadsheet, it's not included at this time. But we did work and calculate out what that social cost of the greenhouse gas would be if it were part of our factors today. So we took the mileage and the amount of gasoline used, we did the conversion, and also kilowatts to create the electric and so forth for all three categories, and converted to the metric tons. Currently, let me back up one line, excuse me. We're looking at what the metric tons are initial. We calculate at 0 for the retrofit vehicles because our life expectancy of that vehicle has been expelled using it as a police vehicle. So when we receive it, it has gone through its life cycle, its normal life cycle and accounting for us. So we use 0 as the metric tons there. 17.5 is what we found as the average to create the battery for the Bolt in both categories. We then took a yearly metric ton conversion based on fuel or kilowatts and how many metric tons were created in creating the energy to supply the electric vehicle. And the reused vehicles, we came out with a calculation of 4.06 metric tons per year on average versus 0.71 for the EV vehicle. We moved into the total 8-year life cycle. We're at 32.50 tons created. At the end of the total life cycle with the EV vehicle, including the initial 17.5, we were at 23.2 tons. We then used the social carbon tax as it's estimated right now of $51. We took that versus our total tonnage over the 8-year life cycle to see what those dollars amounts would be. You can see with the reused police vehicle or repurposed police vehicles, it's significantly higher than the EV vehicles. We're at $1,657 versus $1,183. We also took what may be proposed by the Biden administration of $125 per ton. And again, you can see the repurposed vehicle is more costly at $4,062 versus $2,900 of the EV vehicle, so that you have that information with you or for your use. We then go down to the next section, which is combined actual cost versus the social carbon cost. With the social carbon cost. So we took, if you go back up here, the cost of ownership less vehicle sales for the repurposed police vehicle, which we said was a negative cost to the building department of $2,169. We took that versus the lifetime metric ton of $1,657, but we had a negative still $511. We, again, going back up, we took the negative $2,100 against the lifetime metric ton of $125 at $4,062, and the social carbon cost for an 8-year life cycle would be $1,893.50. We then did the same with both the EV vehicle with no grant and with the grant. I will run through the with the grant rather than both columns. You can see that, again, the lifetime metric ton at $51 of social carbon is $1,183 for an 8-year life cycle. For an 8-year life cycle at the $125 is $2,950. Those numbers, or those dollar amounts, versus the cost of ownership starting at $1,700 or $17,816, with the cost of $1,183 brings at $51 a social carbon, brings us up to cost of ownership of $19,000. If we look at the social carbon cost at $125, it brings us up to cost of that vehicle at $20,717. We did include that we would have to install EV charging stations to be able to support the vehicles. You'll see on the spreadsheet, we have estimated cost of $135,000. Granted, this wasn't done to spec or anything of that nature. We had our staff, our in-house registered electrician, take a look at what we had, what our current costs are, what we estimated labor to be, the engineering and design costs, inspection costs, and came up with the $135,000. This does not include any rebates for the chargers at this time. We've also been looking into possibility of a place and go setup, which runs off of solar panels, which would be slightly less than this, but not significantly less than this, but would give us an option of being able to move the charging station to an area that we might find more ideal for staff vehicles to be placed during the evening. But we have information, we are continuing to get information, but we'll look to the board for directive as to if we're moving forward with electric vehicles and if we will be pursuing the other option. Again, if you look at the very bottom of my spreadsheet, you'll see, again, we based it on an 8-year annual life cycle based on the warranty of the battery. Currently, a 2019 Bolt replacement battery is MSRP $19,000. Our hope would be that this cost will go down significantly as the technology increases. So we didn't want to figure any of that into our cost analysis, which we would normally try to do some of that so that we'd be budgeted better. Our gasoline cost is $1.18. I know people are going to go, how is that possible? As a municipality, a government entity, we do not pay taxes. This is our average cost for gasoline last year. At one point, we paid in far less than $1 a gallon. It makes me want to become my own municipality and fill my vehicle. But that's what that was based on. Our kilowatt cost estimated is 0.054 cents per kilowatt life cycle. That is our current kilowatt hour cost under our current contract with our vendor, which is set to expire at the end of the year. So our dear friend, Mr. Traub, will have some work ahead of him, along with the manager and the assistant manager on NU on our new procurement of electric. Again, our fourth was we looked at the Chevy Bolt. It is the cheapest There are 2 vehicles listed on the CoStar purchasing contract with the state. This was the least expensive of the 2. This is what we based our estimates on. So that's essentially how we come to our numbers, how we look to make our decisions as a staff based on the current policy. As the commissioner has indicated, staff is looking for direction as to we should repurpose vehicles. The board's desire is to modify the current policy or deviate from the current policy and instruct staff to buy up to the 5 electric vehicles, or that the board wishes to have a sustainability director look at it and give guidance. The only indication when Commissioner McKeon called me today was I said that you will need some kind of matrix or metric for them to work by, because if they were told to use the current policy, that I would think that they would come very close to the same conclusion that we have using the information that we have at hand. That said, that completes my presentation of the spreadsheet for this evening, and turn it back over to you, Commissioner. And
Thank you very much, Paul. So at this point now, we'll take commissioner questions.
And I need to stop sharing my screen here.
Yeah.
Which I can't find the button. There we go.
Okay. Commissioner Courtney, I see your hand first.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And thank you, Paul, for this presentation and for answering questions throughout the week. I appreciate a lot of work that went into this. And so I just have a couple of small questions, and then I'll go ahead and give comments with a suggestion for delay. You did your analysis using the Chevy Bolt that's available to us on CoStars. Is that the only vehicle available to us on CoStars that fits this category?
There is only one other vehicle, and I will turn to Mr. Malteri. I think it was a Toyota RAV4 or Highlander that's available to us through CoStars.
Was it more or less expensive?
It was more expensive. So we went with the less expensive vehicle. But Mr. Malteri, I see his mute is off. Pete, would you?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So it was actually the Ford, that new Mustang SUV that's coming out. Which that's why it's not cheaper.
The E-Stang, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be really cool to have one of those. So
the other rumor I'm hearing from GM is that once they have the Hummer platform out, that's going to be another one. I think the cheapest one on that platform is $85,000.
Probably not a great option. I think one of the I have a couple of frustrations when I look at this. Not anything to do with your calculations or what you're basing it on, but one of my broader questions is, I can go to the Tesla website, as I did in my email, and I can get a Model 3 for cheaper than what you can get a Bolt for on CoStars. And I'm wondering, why do I, as a consumer, have significantly more and less expensive options than the township does?
Well, that said, when we go to CoStars, these are the vehicles that have been approved. These are what the contracts with the CoStar vendors are offering the vehicles for. We have not negotiated with them. At times we find that we can negotiate with price with them, but I would caution in that when you look at some of the advertisements for, say, just the Bolt in general, when you look at it, read the fine print. Much of it, the price is significantly less, but they're taking the $7,500 rebate and they're putting it towards what you're seeing as your cost to buy the purchase vehicle. That said, they're showing you that they're willing to help you work on that, which we show in our last column here. Also, there's also many identifiers that say must be a 2020 in-stock vehicle at this time. We stay away from in-stock on-floor models. One of the reasons we do that is a lot of times they're loaded with all the bells and whistles. What's the matter if we give staff bells and whistles? Nothing until they break. And then we have the additional cost. But even simpler than that, you buy the in-stock on-lot vehicle that's been upgraded, has the fancier rims, has the fancier rims on them. Someone hits a curb, blows out a tire and rim, We don't want to be buying the $400 or $500 rim here as the township. We want the $100 steel rim that's as cheap as possible, because unlike, the normal homeowner consumer, you may go through one in the lifetime of the vehicle. We may go through 10. So there are factors that we always look at when we're purchasing vehicles. What the carrying costs and additional costs. We could look at other vehicles, Commissioner, but to do so outside of the CoStar's contract means that we as a staff have to create a specification. Then we have to go through the public bidding process, which then could be, could extend the period of doing it, but that means staff has to concentrate on actually creating the specifications, putting it out for bid, the whole process that we do with any large project. So that's why most municipalities use the CoStar's platform, because that is done and already procured. As I noted earlier, we have not tried to negotiate any cost or any savings with any of the dealerships at this time. We use the numbers. So what we've presented to you is at what we have at hand at this time.
Thank you. That's very helpful in sort of helping me understand the ecosystem within which we're working. I think another...
Oh, if I may interrupt, Mr. Malteri has his hand up, and maybe I will offer a lot more than I can. As I said, he's my right hand on this. In this instance, he is using his right hand, I hope, or his left when he raises it. Pete.
So, Commissioner Courtney, you said the Model S was the one you were talking about that was cheaper?
Model 3.
Model 3, okay. I just wanted to make sure I had my notes right. Bear with me 1 second here.
Yeah.
This is the exercise Pete puts me through on a daily basis. So.
I had hair when I started working for the township. So. Well, my computer's not cooperating. I was just trying to pull it up. I was curious on the specs, but like Paul said, a lot of times these basic vehicles or your baseline vehicles that you could buy won't meet what we need. Yeah, they might have the nicer wheels. It could cost more to repair them. At the same time, I'm familiar with Tesla. I haven't driven one, but I'm assuming they have a lot more creature comfort options than we really want to provide to staff at this time. So that's another thing we try to keep in mind too.
We don't want self-driving building inspector cars.
Well, if the problem is if something goes wrong with that creature comfort,
yes,
we need to fix it.
So what? Just to summarize, I think what I'm hearing is like we pay more upfront costs to try to reduce our lifetime maintenance costs because we use these cars differently than consumers. Is that sort of a safe way?
In some sense, yes. Sometimes we're not paying more upfront. It's that, as I said, we haven't negotiated and so forth. But
okay, I mean, that's helpful in one of my frustrations with this comparison. So thank you for that. My other frustration with this comparison is that we're comparing the costs of a used vehicle, not accounting for the years of use that we've already put on it, to a brand new vehicle. It's kind of an apples and oranges comparison, but it's the choice we're being given right now, and the problem I have with it is that we're kind of making this choice at the wrong time, right? We should have been doing this further upstream when we bought the sedans in the first place. But as we talked about in the last meeting, these were police vehicles, and the state creates the requirements, and we didn't have that option available to us. So I really like Commissioner McKeon's framing of this topic that he put in the beginning, and so I'm going to go with option number 3, Commissioner McKeon, which is new policy. I think we have a few reasons why it would be good for us to wait on this decision. The aforementioned sustainability director is just one of them. I also like that we talked about metrics that we could provide and some direction we could provide to the sustainability director. And this board will hopefully be considering an energy transition resolution that's been put together by the EAC. And in that resolution, there is a goal set in terms of the amount of time this township has to transition the vehicle fleet to zero emissions vehicles, which I think would be a good way to reframe this conversation. It's not just about what the township's costs are. I'm very excited that we have an analysis that shows the social cost of carbon, because that is one way to consider what the financial implications are. Another thing that's coming, also from the EAC and the Sustainability Steering Committee, and some help from the Montgomery County Planning Commission, is a sustainability plan that we should be hopefully getting a chance to review a draft of this year. That will also address the need for us to change our fleet from combustion engines to electric or some other low emissions or zero emissions vehicle. So I would ask of all of you if possible, to continue to delay this choice until we have the sustainability director on board, until we've had a chance to consider an energy transition resolution, and potentially until we've had a chance to look at a sustainability plan. All three of these are going to play factors into what the policy should be going forward for us with our vehicle fleet, as well as a number of other energy related and environmental sustainability related decisions that this board makes on an ongoing basis. So, like I said, I would advocate for some delay so that we could have the time to address the current policy, because I would argue that purely looking at the bottom line of expenses is no longer the right way to think about this decision. The other thing I just want to note in conclusion here, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's great to see the social cost of carbon as something that we could possibly do some accounting against. And I would advocate that any expense that we look at in this township related to energy or the environment should now include that sort of accounting. What is the social cost of carbon of the actions that we are endorsing with our policies or that we are choosing? So with that, thank you guys for the time, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Are there any other commissioners with questions? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Kramer.
Paul, I do have one question. Did your analysis regarding the Bolt, and I will say that we've had a Bolt for 4 years and we love them and we think they're great vehicles. But did your analysis of the Bolt factor in the fact that Bolts currently are offering $9,000 cash back?
Mr. Kramer, as I indicated earlier, many of the incentives and so forth that you as a resident or the public, we do not get the same extension. What we have available to us at this time is the $7,500 grant monies. The other grants and rebates that may be available for the 2021 Bolts for municipalities and governmental entities have not been released yet, or if they have, they haven't been brought to, we haven't located them or been brought to our attention, but we are. So we have different rules that govern how we can purchase and what we can purchase as a municipality. So what is figured in, as I indicated in the third column of our spreadsheet, the EV purchase with rebates, that's where I show those monies that we know of that are available to us as a municipality at this time.
Did you analyze other alternatives other than using CoStar, such as leasing an electric vehicle?
We, as the board, as the township, several times in the past have looked at municipal leases, which are much different than that of the lease for the public consumer. Basically, essentially, what a lease is for a public municipality is the cost of the vehicle over the lifetime of the vehicle, the lease period, say it's 4 years. So they break that out with a 4% interest on it. At the end of that lease, essentially, you own that vehicle for $1 is how municipal leases are structured. They are structured in such a way or in that way so that municipalities that are not as affluent as us or as fortunate as us to have an equipment fund, to have funds at hand, have a way to finance and not show debt on their spreadsheets. but that has been looked at several times in the past. And if Pete or Bob may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last time that was looked at was probably 3 years ago or 4. And that's what the terms of municipal leases were at that time.
I'll save my comments until other people have their questions answered.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Are there any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Durbin. Oh, you're on mute.
I forget every time. Paul, do you know if, like the environmental people in the state have been looking at alternative ways of buying cars or leasing or whatever? I know that, this is the way we've done it before because that's the way it's set up, but do you know if they're looking at any changes or not?
I do not know if the environmental groups are. I know that in these groups that Pete and I like drive PA forward and all, they're always looking for ways to help expand the EV vehicle fleets throughout the state and what can be done and what lobbying can be done and so forth. So I'm sure that it's a topic that's being discussed. And where they've gotten, I cannot answer that, but I'm sure at the state level or within the Drive PA Forward groups and all, they're working on that. The goal is to do as much to expand electric vehicle use throughout the state, whether it be vehicles itself or the infrastructure to support those vehicles.
The other question I had in terms of installing the charging stations, am I correct that there's supposedly going to be some big grants coming out for those?
Our understanding is that with the Recovery Act, that there a lot of what we're seeing currently in our discussions is a lot of organizations or groups are looking to help you. And what it is using your Recovery Act money. We're being told that as the administration creates their policies that there may be grants coming. We haven't been notified of anything more than what we have currently. Pete, as I said earlier, Pete, this is my daily with Pete. I get numerous emails and phone calls, and please hold while I get you the following information. So Pete's like my AP wire. So we stay pretty up to date.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Durbin. Any other commissioners with questions? All right. So at this point, we'll move on to public comment. And Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any public comment. Is that right? Okay. All right. So at this point, we'll now move on to commissioner comments. And like I said earlier, if you can try to limit it to just one set, go through everything you want to say. And at the end, what we'll try to do is get a consensus amongst the 11 of us as to how we should proceed between the 3 options. So, please feel free to say how you feel about those options and any kind of factors or other things that should be considered based on what option you want. With that, who would like to go first?
The first time the board's been quiet in a while.
Just something advantageous about waiting, I guess. Commissioner Kramer, the big winner.
I didn't want to just wait until somebody else volunteered, so I might as well go ahead. I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Courtney said. And I also opt for choice number 3, which is to postpone the decision on this until we get a sustainability director or sustainability manager on board who can advise on this. And also we can address the sustainability plan and the goals that the EAC has been working on, including the goals for transitioning our fleet, as was recommended back in 2018 by a consultant. This isn't just about money. This is about what's doing right, both for our community and for the world, because we need to begin to address the single greatest threat to our existence and to our community, which is climate change. This week, as you know, I did an analysis of another alternative, which is the idea of leasing a less expensive electric vehicle. And I discovered that the Nissan Leaf is now available for lease at $181 a month for a 3-year lease. Presumably that could be for a longer period of time as well. And the reason that that is a lot less than the cost of a Bolt is that a Leaf, which also gets 226 miles per range, starts with a sale price at about a little over $31,000. And when you factor in the $7,500 tax credit, which typically would get factored into the amount of a lease, the lease amount is quite low. And based on the analysis that I did of the numbers, leasing a Leaf at $181 a month would be substantially less expensive than retrofitting these vehicles and the old police vehicles that get, I think, 11 or 13 miles per gallon. And that, in fact, if we were to lease vehicles for somewhere even over $300 a month, it would still be more economical than retrofitting these police vehicles. And that's really just factoring in the cost of the retrofit, the cost of the lease, and the savings on gasoline, and really some savings that there should be on maintenance because the vehicles would be under warranty. So I guess given the fact that there are options like this available to the township that would actually save us money over the cost of the retrofitting the old police vehicles, I think that these are options that we have an obligation really to explore and to determine whether or not there is a better way to do this in a way that is more sustainable. And I think this is something that is really a job for our sustainability manager, who I hope we will be hiring in the very near future. And since there is not any urgency, because we have existing vehicles at that can be used right now for a few more months, there's no urgency to making this decision today. I think that it is prudent for us to really have somebody look at what our options are and really give us the recommendation in light of the sustainability plan that we're developing, the hopefully the energy transition plan that we're developing, and to try to come up with an approach that is more sustainable than recycling large SUVs for this purpose. So I strongly support the idea of holding off on making this decision. Clearly, we have to consider cost, but we also have to consider the environment, and we also have to consider that we should be leaders in moving us forward and moving our community forward, and set an example for other communities on what we should be doing to protect our environment.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. I just want to say briefly, I agree with the thoughts Commissioner Kramer just expressed and Commissioner Courtney before that, and I think you also, Chairman McKeon. I would just add, though, that I'm concerned about the cost differences Mr. McElhenney presented. I respect, having just said that I'd prefer to wait until we have a sustainability director. I understand that there might be other alternatives, and I'd like to hear them. The other thing, though, that I wonder, and I hope that when we're ready to discuss this further, we might consider that if in fact the numbers that were presented tonight about the higher cost of the electric vehicles bears out, whether if we ended up going with a cost saving by retrofitting the vehicles, whether with that savings there's other things, sustainability measures we could invest in that would bring us a similar kind of return to the environment with the money we save from retrofitting the vehicles. So planting more trees, doing other kinds of measures around the township is also worth a thought, and I hope we would hear that when the time comes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. This is just some information, and Ernie, you may know the answer to this. Aren't we restricted in the cars that we are able to buy? There has to be a certain American content or assembling. Would we be, is a Nissan Leaf even an option that we can look into?
Commissioner, you're right. There are some regulations we live under with respect to steel products, and but it all depends again on where they're produced. In this day and age, cars, even if they're Japanese, Korean, whatever they are, many of them are produced in the United States. So it all depends.
Assembled. Yeah. Also, what happens if we delay for a year? Because, just because we get a sustainability director doesn't mean that we can turn this discussion around in a week. And, I would view that it would take at least a year or longer to visit this problem again. And can we wait for a year or two?
I may have some thoughts on that, but I would say that, we wait for a year to make the decision. It's taking us so long right now to get vehicles delivered when we do order them. Then we may be as much as 2 years out by the time we actually take delivery. And of course, our risk there is we're extending vehicles that we have now that have already gone through a 6-year lifespan, and we're extending them even further. So we may have some serious repair costs down the road. That would be our risk.
That also something that you mentioned last time we had this discussion, Ernie, is that if we're talking about retrofitting 5 vehicles, and if we want to go to a hybrid or an electric vehicle, you're really talking about we need more than 5, because they, while some are being charged, others are going to be on the street. Isn't that what you talked about a month ago?
Commissioner, when I was saying that, I was talking about police vehicles that have to be on the road 24/7. So you can't park police vehicles, but these building and planning inspector vehicles can be parked overnight charged.
Okay, thank you. That's what I got.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Vice President Gavin.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And I want to thank Mr. McElhaney for the presentation, and probably thank Mr. Malteri more, because I'm guessing he's the brains behind all of these calculations, which wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. So I'm struck, having listened to this presentation and gone through these numbers, at how big of a difference it is between retrofitting and buying a new electric vehicle. The total cost, even with social carbon at $125, looking at under $2,000 versus over $20,000, you're looking at a 10 times difference. And I absolutely agree with everything said before by Commissioner Kramer and Commissioner Courtney and Commissioner Grimes, that it's about more than money. But there has to be some way to compare. And I think that's what that social carbon cost is. That's not actually comparing money. That's taking a comparison and making some way to compare it. So using $125 as a social carbon cost, I think makes sense. We may even as a policy want to make it $200 as a social carbon cost to go well above and beyond what the regular standard is. But even assuming we did that, even assuming we looked at the Nissan Leaf, which is, as Commissioner Kramer said, $7,000 cheaper than the Bolt, even assuming some of the maintenance costs are not, apples to apples, you're still looking at a comparison where buying a new electric vehicle here is going to be, maybe not 10 times the cost of retrofitting, but still 5 times, and I'll put cost in quotes because that's cost plus the social carbon cost. So we can't forget what we're doing here by adding in the social carbon cost is really adding in that value of doing the right thing, of being sustainable, of zero emissions. That's what that is. That's not a hard cost. So I would love to be able to do everything we can to transition. But as Commissioner Grimes said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, this might not be the best area to do it. We might get a much better return with other areas because the cost of buying a new vehicle versus the cost of retrofitting, it just doesn't seem to make sense, even going beyond the actual hard costs. And we might be better off with trees, with other things that we can do to make our township more sustainable, more environmentally friendly than this option here. I'm fine holding off if we can until a new sustainability director is in place. As Mr. McKeon said, or Commissioner McKeon said, it would be good to provide some support and examples of what we're looking for if we hold off. And to me, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's sitting down with Mr. Multeri and Mr. McElhaney if we really need to, but really Mr. Multeri, sitting down and going through these numbers and making sure that we are accounting for that sustainability piece and working together, looking at it from that lens of a sustainability director, in addition to the lens from Public Works. So I'd certainly welcome having those calculations done together, but I don't think it's doing something totally different and from scratch. And our job, I think, is to really set that policy of what we're looking for. And to me, a large part of that is what are we valuing that social carbon cost at? And to me, that's our job. And then allowing our professionals who are very good at their jobs to make these calculations and look at it from all perspectives, sustainability, Public Works, and all other perspectives. So I am okay holding off, but I am, convinced by what I've seen in this presentation that I don't believe buying new electric vehicles are the right option here, just because it just doesn't seem to make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Commissioner Durbin. Mute again.
Yeah, I thought I unmuted. Sorry. This is, it's a very complex decision. And I really appreciate all of the work people have put into trying to give us comparison points and so forth. Some of it, I'm not sure we're looking at the right comparison points, and that's why I would like to have a sustainability specialist in on it. Part of what I'm looking at is, seeing these gas guzzling SUVs driving around. It's like not setting a good example. And gasoline cars are really part of the worst part of air pollution that, is not good for kids' lungs and so forth. And, I have a feeling that retrofitting old SUVs that have been, worked hard, are not going to last as long as an electric car is going to last. The people who get electric cars, they last a really long time, the ones that I have seen. So I just would like to have somebody else take another look at this. I mean, I know that we are hemmed in by some of the regulations we have to deal with, but I'd kind of like to see if there's any way to push the envelope. And I'm not so sure that we've got all the real cost comparisons exactly right. I know these fleet people know a lot more about this than I do, but I would just still have this feeling I'd like to have someone else take a look at it, a fresh look at it.
Thank you, Commissioner Durbin. Other commissioner comments? President Bernheim.
If I may take a slight prerogative, and I'll defer the floor to Commissioner Zeloff, who raised his hand first.
Thank you, President Bernheim and Commissioner McKeon. I'm going to start with a question of our manager. What we're talking about the vehicles to be retrofitted are what?
The vehicles we would retrofit are the used police SUVs.
Okay. So first I want to thank, and I think I'll emphasize my thanks for our Director of Public Works and for Pietro as well, our Director of Fleet. And what I thought was a very thorough analysis and I think addressed a lot of the questions raised a month ago. I think it's straightforward. So as Vice President Gavrin said, this is an analysis that attempts to put a price or a metric on the social cost of carbon, and the analysis used the high end number that was suggested previously. So it is converting the social cost to a metric for comparison and analysis. But in round numbers, it's an additional $20,000 per vehicle. So for 5 vehicles, $100,000. So it's hard to understand why we would do that today. The issue about a sustainability director doing an analysis, I don't think it's going to be any different today. I think it might be different a year from now. I sure hope it's going to be different in the future, so that it does make sense to buy EVs or hybrids. But we've now spent 2 times on this, and I think we've got a township manager, a public works director, a CFO, a fleet manager who have spent a lot of time on an analysis. There will be, as has been said, lots of things to look at for to improve the township's, reduce the township's use of energy and to be a more sustainable organization. So I'm looking forward to a future review, but I don't see why we want to wait. I think I give a great deal of credit to our staff for the analysis that they've presented in great detail in 2 meetings, and that we've spent a lot of time on. And as to leadership as a township, I'm not aware of other townships hiring a sustainability director. And so I think we have demonstrated leadership, and I'm sure we will continue to do so. So I don't see a need to wait. I think I do see a need for analysis in the future, as we will do with all the other vehicles that we looked at last month, so that they will be, we'll continue to look at what's available for municipal use. And there will be a time when battery life is longer, battery cost is less expensive, battery size is smaller, when it will make sense for us to begin the transition to an EV fleet. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelov. President Burnham?
Thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon, or maybe we should call you Monty Hall for your 3 selections. And it appears that door number 3 seems to be the leader, this evening, and that's understandable. I'm not going to, repeat a lot of the excellent comments by absolutely everybody here, other than the thanks to Paul and Pietro for their work, and also for Paul explaining it to me as if I was a 6-year-old late last night to, digest these numbers. But that being stated, I think there's some of us along the lines of Commissioner Zelov might be able to say, look, I'm okay with making a decision now. Others saying, let's get the input of a sustainability director to see what if anything we can learn from that expertise. And I believe, as Vice President Gavin, pointed out, that expertise may be something that's in conjunction with, it's not hitting a reset button, because that which, a sustainability director brings to the table is a different expertise than what fleet management is. So it's a combination of those. And as Commissioner Courtney and Commissioner Kramer have pointed out, we've had some recommendations from the EAC. In realizing that if you're reading the news today, it's a matter of when, not if, that the manufacturers are shifting to the electric vehicles. That will come in stages. The electric vehicles we can use as average consumers differs than the type of vehicles that Paul and Pietro are sending out for their staff, and I imagine it will be a continuum of time to get some of those more, what I'll use the term, heavy duty vehicles into the electric world than others. At least that's what I read and understand to be taking place. Also, as Commissioner Zelov pointed out, the world of batteries is changing. As Commissioner Courtney will say, I keep pressing this book and publications by Bill Gates and his company that's building this lithium battery, which is the original, or the tests now indicate that it can charge 80% in 15 minutes, but it's a different design. And whether that different design then fits in new vehicles or the same chargers, all of that, I think the technology is going to improve so that at some point in time, a lot of these decisions will be easier. That long-winded comment, which I meant to be shorter than it is, goes back to, all right, the consensus here seems to be, let's bring somebody else in, see what we learn from their expertise. Maybe they say, you know what, fleet management's, assessment is spot on for the moment, given where we are in the world with this. But, here's what we're going to do in the future because it is coming. But I believe in Mr. McNeely Mr. McElhaney will correct me if I'm wrong, a short delay in doing this, and I underline short because we're going to have somebody on board soon, isn't going to set us back, that we can do that without any type of detriment. So if that's the consensus of where we are, let's do that, get the information out, and then we can make a decision. And hopefully next time we do it, we're not going through from A to Z as we had to do here. All of us be educated. If we need to delegate a couple of us to get that information and bring it back to the group, that may be a little bit more efficient than what we did tonight. Not to say that tonight wasn't important. So with that being said, I'll leave it to you, Commissioner McKeon, Monty Hall, how we get to move to select, door number 3, and then we can add in that other criteria that may be for consideration and get some other input, and then hopefully quickly be able to make a decision on this so we're not retrofitting horse and buggies.
All right, and I'm going to go back to Commissioner Churchill again. He's got his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a consensus about door number 3. We've heard I would like to have some kind of vote, and I would also say that the longer we delay, you get the self-fulfilled prophecy that we experienced about 10 years ago. Let's extend the life of our vehicles to a point that it gets so expensive that, this discussion is moot. So I would just, I'm not sure delaying is a good idea. I would like to have a consensus of the board about retrofitting, and if people want to delay, that's fine. If a majority wants to retrofit, That's fine too.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. And is anyone else have any more comments? Otherwise, I was going to make a few comments and then see what the consensus was. Okay. Well, to me, it was pretty clear that there's nothing behind door number 2. I don't think anybody favored that option. So the way I see it now, we have the first option, which is we defer to staff with the retrofit, or it was option number 3, which is a new policy. And from what I heard, new policy entailed getting the sustainability director involved, looking at social carbon costs, sitting down talking to Paul and Pete again, and getting input from people. And I also get the sense that we do not want to wait a long time for that option. We want to move quickly on the vehicles, and we don't want to have that sit around. And I also just wanted to point out, a lot of public works directors can sit there as complaint managers, and I really appreciate Paul and Pete having a forward-thinking approach to things. Really trying to look at cutting-edge stuff in their department. So I thank them for the time they put into it. And again, we look at the cost. Paul had mentioned this a couple of times, but if you see an article on the internet about certain costs here and there, a lot of times that is private costs, and as a governmental entity, our numbers are skewed a little bit differently. So that's just something to consider when you put everything together. So with that, I'd like to see who here favors the first approach that we had, which was sticking with the staff and the existing policy and retrofitting the vehicles. So please just raise your hands. Okay, so I count Commissioner Churchill and Commissioner Zelb. I count 2. And so if we go to door number 3, who favors the policy of a new policy and bringing in the sustainability director and getting him or her on board?
Well, yes and no, if I may, because the way I see it is we're not saying here, quote, new policy. The sustainability director may come and say, hey, you know what, maintain the status quo, new policy at a later time. So I would look at it that we're delaying to get information then to decide what, if any, changes we would make. Is that fair modification?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because that's, it's a work in progress. So
right.
we put that all together.
Right.
In there.
I don't want it right. And the reason I said I don't want to eliminate any possibilities from anyone who's going to come in. They may say, you know what, I think fleet management's doing an excellent job. I agree for whatever reasons, and I have no idea what they might be. Maintain what you're doing, and then, as the technology develops, we'll do X, Y, Z. So, all right.
Right. So it looks like we have a consensus to go down that road to wait a little bit, and then see once the sustainability director comes and see where that goes. And it could end up being exactly what we had as the first option, or it could be an entirely new policy.
Right. And just so if I can steal a little thunder from our township manager, I know that there have been a number of interviews with some really highly qualified people. So hopefully that's moving, promptly. And, we ought to hopefully have somebody, lined up, fairly soon.
All right. And so, Rick, you want to speak again?
I know.
Churchill. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Let me introduce myself. Waiting, it's kind of open-ended. Are we going to wait for 6 months, a year, or, I know that we can't put a firm timeline, but I would at least like to have a general timeline. Ernie?
Well,
what's a reasonable time?
We're in the first set of interviews for sustainability director or manager. We probably will, because of the difficulty of choosing among them, have to go to a second interview process. So we're probably a good couple months away before somebody walks in the door. And of course, the day they walk in, they won't be able to immediately walk in and say, "Here's your choice." So we'll have to give them a little bit of time. So we're a few months away.
Well, hopefully it can be done before the end of the year.
Yes.
Is that a reasonable expectation?
Yeah, I would say well before the end of the year. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. I won't say anything.
Before we close the meeting, I just wanted to confirm with Manager McNeely and Director McElhenney. I mean, you've got pretty clear direction here from this meeting?
We do.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Well, with that, President Bernheim, that concludes the business of the Public Works Committee.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon. And again, thanks to everybody for all of the work on the front end of this, and as well as tonight, and all the emails and the education that I at least got on electric vehicles and their costs. But before we do adjourn this evening, because that does complete the business that we had on our scorecard lineup, is there anybody who wishes to bring anything up, any type of announcements one way or another? Seeing none, other than announcing the Phillies did win and take 2 out of 3 from the Mets. I thank everybody for their hard work this evening and wish everybody a good night. We are hereby adjourned.
All right. So long, everyone.
Night all.